You pledge yourself to me, and that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You father the orphan, your kindness makes me whole. You shoulder our weakness, and your strength becomes our own. You're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. You will have your bride, free of all her guilt, rid of all her shame, known by her true name. And that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. And that's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips.
You know, as Christians, it's super important that we're a people who pray. And, you know, praying we complicate prayer, and I think sometimes we're afraid to pray. One of the hardest things to do is to pray in public and pray in front of people, and I get it, it's hard. But the reality is that Jesus expects us to be a people who pray. You know, Jesus didn't say, if you pray. What did he say?
When you pray.
He said, when you pray. And he said that multiple times, which means that he would expect that we as his people pray. Something that's really important and really valuable, really powerful, where I'm serving currently, is this idea that God is personal and intimate. Because the God of religion is very not personal. And actually, when you start breaking down all of the ideas behind religious gods, you find out that they're petty, they're tyrants, they're petty about what's important and what's not. And you think, really, your God that's important to your God? For example, we have a woman who came to Christ, and she was going to get baptized in our church. And her whole family is LDS, and her niece said to her, she said, Auntie, do you want me to come and help braid all the ladies' hair at your church before baptism? And she said, now, why would we want you to come do that? And she said, well, in our church, she said, if when you're baptized, if every part of you doesn't go under the water, it doesn't count. And when you, now, they don't realize what they're teaching and what they're doing, but when you unpack that, it's like you show up at your baptism, and you're there because you want to give your life to God as a public display of your commitment to God. And what you're telling people is that God shows up to your baptism with a referee shirt on and a tape measure. And if a 1/4 inch of your hair doesn't go all the way under the water, he's on top of the water measuring, and he says, no, 1/4 inch, no good. You're out of here. I don't receive you. Really? Is that what God is like? And so what I tell them all the time and what we preach is that the number one word in the New Testament that God uses to describe himself, anybody know what that is? More times than any other word in the New Testament. To you and I. When you hear Herzl pray, he says about every 6 words when he prays. Abba. Father. Jesus told us more times than not that God was our Father, and to call him Father, address him as Father. And so, you think that when God was bringing his name, and his name's kind of a big deal, right? That when he was bringing his name, it would have been like Almighty, Omnipresent, Potent God of the heavens, Creator of the earth and all that's in them. That's not what he wants you to call him. What he invited you to call him was
God.
Father. And that's relationship. And prayer is the avenue that God gave us to relate. The disciples came to him, and a couple times in the disciples' ministry, they asked some really cool questions, some really easy questions, like, when are you coming back? I'm glad they asked that question, right? And then they asked him another time. They said, hey, teach us to pray like the other guys. Like, teach us to pray like John's teaching his disciples. And then Jesus just kept it really simple. In Matthew's gospel, he taught them to pray. And where it's recorded in Luke's gospel in chapter 11, that was 2 years later, and Jesus shortened it. You would think after they walked with him those 2 years that now they would be ready for the real stuff. But he didn't make it more complicated 2 years later. After they had grown in their faith, he actually shortened it a little bit because he didn't want to complicate things. And so I try to read it if I... You guys probably all have it memorized because you guys are like